Hi folks, we're here once again with another one of our weekly Scoresheet podcasts. Today we have a guest. We're lucky enough to have Brent Hershey from Ron Chandler's BBHQ website. How are you today, Brent?
Doing well. Jeff, how are you?
I am fine. It's a beautiful California, 75 degrees sunny day.
Great. I'm in Philadelphia and it's a little overcast, but it's fairly pleasant for June.
Yeah, summer is starting out kind of in parts of the country anyhow. Pretty nice. So let's see, you've been working, I think you told me earlier, you've been writing freelance articles for BBHQ for 10 years or so?
Yeah, a little over 10 years. I think I started 1998 or so. Like many of Baseball HQ's writers, I was a subscriber first. And at that time, Ron had sent out a call for people that were interested in writing for him. And I answered that and quickly got rejected. But then at some point, about 6 months or so later, I tried again. And yeah, had been freelancing with them up until January of this year, at which point I came on staff as the managing editor. So since January, I've been working with Ron as well as Ray Murphy, our managing director, who's also a Scoresheet player, and getting things ready for the site. My responsibilities there include I write a column twice a week, but also am responsible for editing and smoothing out a lot of the other submissions that we have, making sure our metrics are used correctly and that the spelling's right and things like that.
All the things an editor does.
All the things an editor does, that's right.
Yeah. And for those of you that might not know, Ron Chandler started at baseballhq.com. Well, he started out, I guess, like us, before the web. So he started out with a newsletter and a book, Ron Chandler's Baseball Forecaster. Both he and I started roughly the same time, back in 1987, when we were still doing everything by postal mail and fax was a newfangled invention. And then he has moved on to the web like most folks. So the correct address is baseballhq.com, isn't it?
That's correct, yep.
Yeah, and he does all sorts of really cutting-edge statistical work to try to predict breakout candidates and who's going to keep up their good stats the rest of the season. So it's both a site for preparing for your draft in the preseason, and then maybe just as much or more so for running your team during the season. As Ron has been fond of saying for many, many years, there is a little more to playing fantasy baseball than just drafting a team in March. You do have to do some adjusting during the season. And then the other thing that Ron and I have kind of stayed in close touch over the years. He runs a symposium, a conference down in Arizona. I try to go every year. But he also has a section on his website that talks about Scoresheet, various Scoresheet strategies, various articles, a Scoresheet forum. And so it's not just statistics and player performance. There's also some very Scoresheet specific stuff on his site.
Yeah, and for the past several years, there's a couple of us on staff that are Scoresheet players and have that experience. Most of our target audience or market is the, more a standard rotisserie marketplace, but myself and others have tried to keep the Scoresheet content alive because obviously there are different considerations when putting together a Scoresheet team than a rotisserie team. And so the past several years anyway, we've run weekly articles starting when our coverage ramps up in February through the beginning of the season. There's usually weekly strategy articles during that point. Then some other articles throughout the year on strategy or player pickups. We always have an article around the time of your Scoresheet run supplemental drafts. And so I just finished an article about a week ago previewing the second supplemental draft. And we try to keep coverage going somewhat throughout the whole season.
Yeah. Well, one nice thing, and one reason that for a long time I've been recommending Ron's site for Scoresheet players, is that it's not really rotisserie specific information. I mean, there's obviously some dollar values and all that, but it's also, and for a long time was one of the only places where you could just plain get information on what you folks thought a player would do in the major leagues, which is what translates to what you want for Scoresheet. So a lot of the magazines and websites that started out, they'd tell you John Smith is going to be worth $26 the rest of the year, but they'd be factoring in steals or saves, or wouldn't really explain why he was worth $26. You guys do a much better job of saying, well, we think this player is going to have a on-base percentage of .343 the rest of the year and a slugging percentage of .510, or whatever the numbers are. And so that's the kind of information that a score sheet owner can make great use of.
Yeah, we in our coverage, we try to paint with a broad enough brush that our numbers, our projections about how we think players are going to do can be, applied across many different kind of formats. The score sheet specific articles obviously deal with your format specifically, but even the more general articles we have written in a way that, like I said, they can be applied to the different formats.
Right. One thing about Ron's site over the years is there are a rather, I don't know, maybe intimidating almost array of statistics and little acronyms and all. So if you have never been to Ron's site and you happen to go there, it's like a lot of things. Once you get to know what batting eye means, or some of the other terms he uses, it all becomes very quick to use. And there's a RAR, runs above replacement, that I always use when I'm trying to compare maybe a pitcher to a fielder when it's my turn to pick, and I'm not really sure whether what the outfielder is going to add to my team compared to the value of a pitcher. So something like runs above replacement is kind of nice. It's a good tool for comparing players at different positions.
Yeah, that is a popular tool that we use both at the site and also in the annual book that you talk about. That is a good starting point for, like as you said, basically comparing pitchers specifically to position players, and factoring in the level, what it says, runs above replacement, above or below a replacement player. So it's a helpful metric that we use.
Yeah, no, I like that. And then also, I'm going to mention this earlier, Ron puts on a conference centered around the Arizona Fall League every fall down in Phoenix. I just actually got an email today. I guess you guys are starting to set that up already.
Yeah, that's although it takes place the first week in November. Around this time is when Ron and a couple of us put together ideas for the program, start lining up speakers from across the fantasy baseball industry, so to speak. There are, because it happens in Phoenix when the Arizona Fall League is happening, that attending some of those games is always a part of the conference, and it's a really great weekend. As you know, I've been able to go the past 3 or 4 years, and like you, it's kind of an annual thing that I always put on my calendar.
Yeah, I've actually had to miss the last 2 years because I coached my daughter's volleyball team, and it's a very short season, and the last 2 years it started right that same weekend. But she is now out of 8th grade. She's no longer in that league, so I will be there for sure this year. And for those of you that have never been to an Arizona Fall League, it's like the minor or the spring training games used to be 30 years ago before they got popular. You can sit pretty much anywhere, including one row behind home plate. There's usually 100, 150 people in the entire 5,000 person stadium, and half of those or more are Ron's conference folks. So you can move around, you can sit wherever you want, and you see some really good ball players. It's generally about the top prospects from each team going down, polishing, because they're expected to make the major leagues the next year.
Yeah, there's been quite a track record of players that have gone through there that in a year or two later have become very solid major league players, if not stars.
Yeah. The Ryan Howards of the world, and, well, Michael Jordan when he briefly flirted with baseball, but an awful lot of very good players.
Yeah, and Bryce Harper was down there last year it was his first kind of professional experience. It was right after since he had signed late, he was on what they call a taxi squad, so he's only eligible for a couple games a week. But we did get to see him play one game. I think there's rumors that he will be there on the full-time roster this fall. Those rosters aren't available yet until later in the summer, I believe, August or September. But as each team sends, I forget what it is, half a dozen or so players to that populate the teams, there's often premium minor league talent being showcased in that league.
Yeah, and then, like I said, I'll be there this year. So generally, when I go, we do a few what he calls breakout sessions, where the score sheet folks that are there, which is usually a dozen or so of us, kind of will go out and spend an hour or two together just talking score sheet, while maybe it's the other forum or the other time is being spent on rotisserie. And then we also, the score sheet guys tend to sit together a lot at the games and we talk about score sheet. So if you're interested in going, you might, if you go to baseballhq.com, there'll be a link up about an Arizona forum. And then I was kind of hoping, Brent, that maybe you could describe your favorite one or two statistics that you use to predict players' future performances. Certainly the whole statistics predicting field has come a long ways since the days when you just simply look at some player's batting average from last year and say, okay, he hit 300 last year, he's going to hit 300 this year, I'll draft him high.
Yeah. As I think about how I go about assembling my score sheet rosters, on the pitching side, we have a sort of a catch-all metric that's called base performance value, or BPV. And this attempts to kind of encapsulate the different aspects of a pitcher's performance: ground ball versus fly ball rate, strikeout per walk rate, and it puts it into one number. I've often found it especially helpful to have a ranking of this BPV value to help identify players that are doing these component skills well, but maybe through other means their ERAs or their win total or more traditional statistics aren't reflecting that. And the BPV is sort of scaled in a way that sort of runs from 0 or even sometimes negative numbers up through 100 and past 100. And if you get a pitcher, for instance, that gets anywhere up in the 85 and above range, usually he's displaying the component skills that we like to see that would say that he will be successful down the road. BPV is something I definitely use. I find it most helpful in putting together a score sheet bullpen because of the rotations or because of how bullpens change so much from year to year. And if you're in a normal 13 protect score sheet league, there's only a small handful of relievers that are worthy of keeping, so you kind of have to build your bullpen from year to year. This base performance value is something that I use both in the preseason in selecting, the base bullpen, but also very much during the season, during the supplemental drafts, when there is always, the Antonio Bastardos or the guy from Cleveland, Pastano, the ones that always emerge with a low ERA, with a high strikeout rate that, you can always lean on in your bullpens. That you can shorten your hooks in your bullpen and I think really find success with that. So this BPV, it's both something we have a historical record of. So this is, at any point in one season, this is what any one pitcher's BPV is. And it's also something that we project for the balance of the year, or for, if you're in the off season for the upcoming year, we have projections on what a pitcher's base performance value would be. So that's something that for pitching wise is sort of a catch-all stat or metric that we use.
I guess the premise behind this is that you don't just simply say use a pitcher's past ERA to predict his future ERA, because there are a fair number of luck factors that go into an ERA. Ball might land a foot short of the fence instead of over the fence, or the team's fielding ability. His real life team's fielders might not be as good as some other team. So you try to use component skills such as strikeouts and ground ball fly ball ratios and all, which they've been proven over and over to do a much better job of predicting future ERA than to just simply use past ERA to predict future.
Yeah, one way of looking at it is these component skills that I mentioned or we've talked about are, for the most part, things that a pitcher can control. They can control how many batters they walk per 9 innings. They have some modicum of control on how many strikeouts they get. Whereas, as you said, an ERA, we found from year to year can be much more volatile and is predicated often on things that the pitcher can't control. Once the bat hits the ball and it's out to be fielded, or as you say, is just falls a foot short of the fence and is a double rather than a home run or whatever. So the part of the premise of Baseball HQ is finding and quantifying those parts of pitcher performance, but also batter performance that they can control, and then we have sort of a set of metrics also that are what you could more easily call kind of luck based, where if a player is performing over or under a certain level, it's been shown and researched that it will always sort of snap back to this predetermined level. And so in for lack of a better term, you can say so far that this or that player has been lucky or unlucky so far this season, and that the chances are good that for the remainder of the season, those metrics and then ERAs or batting averages will kind of self-correct to their previous levels.
Right, so you can do the same thing with hitters. You don't just look at their batting average or even on-base or slugging percentage. You look at those numbers, and then you try to put in the numbers that show how much of that might be just plain due to good or bad luck. And that gives you an idea of whether you really think this week's hot hitter is going to keep it up for the next month, or whether maybe you should trade him away while his value is high.
Yeah, right. That's correct.
Huh. Well, that's all. Like I said, that the Baseball HQ side is full of statistics like that, and it definitely goes a long ways towards helping you out when you decide whether you want to trade for or trade away a player or who to draft. It's a great thing. And then, as you mentioned, you've played Scoresheet a number of years.
Yes, that's right. I picked it up. I was thinking about this earlier today, probably about 10 or 12 years ago, something like that. And it's definitely my favorite format, because of its complexity and how I think it mirrors kind of real baseball more than a standard rotisserie league. And I enjoy, constructing pitching rotations and batting lineups, batting orders, and the various levels of control that we have over those, and the fact that we actually, you play out a 162 game season, you actually get results that look similar in some ways to the box scores we all love to read each evening or morning in the paper or online.
My brother David and I, he's a partner of mine in this business, we always are kind of pat ourselves a little bit in the back when we hear people that work in the business like you or Jeff Erickson, who helped start RotoWire and was talking to us a couple weeks ago, when they say, well, this is my favorite format. I got to admit, like everybody, we kind of get a little prideful glow out of that. So I appreciate hearing you say that.
Oh, you should. It's I think you've got a great product, and one thing I know, we feel our Baseball HQ site attracts people that enjoy the complexity of the numbers and learning about, for our site, how these different metrics interact with each other as we think about projecting player performance. And one reason I'm glad that we are keeping up our score sheet coverage, I think it really cross-pollinates a lot with the complexity, and like you said, there's a little bit of a learning curve, I think, with score sheet too, especially if you're coming from a rotisserie background. But it's I think the two customer bases, really mesh well with our enjoyment of the game and our enjoyment of gaming itself and our enjoyment of numbers.
Yeah. No, Ron and I have always thought that we kind of appeal to the same group of people who really kind of want to go past the superficial numbers and want to really kind of maybe, I don't know, dedicated baseball fans, but like the realism aspect of playing score sheet, and also like the delving into what makes players perform like they do, the kind of numbers you can get at Baseball HQ. Well, Brent, it's been great talking to you. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. It's been good telling you a little bit about Baseball HQ, and good talking score sheet, as always.
Yeah, well, thanks. And then if I don't talk to you before, I'm sure I'll see you down in Phoenix come early November.
Yes, we're looking forward to it.
All right, thanks very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay.